Hello, this is Mr. Merlo for lesson 12-3, Simplifying Radical Expressions. Alright, so in this lesson we are kind of reviewing factoring and things like that, and then we're going to simplify by multiplying only. That's kind of the big hint there. And then the first part we'll do is finding any excluded values for the rational expression. And what that means is we're finding any values that is going to make the denominator equal 0. Can't have a denominator equal 0, that's not possible. So some of the questions on the homework will ask you find any excluded values. Some will say simplify. So when it says something like this, find the excluded values, we need to set our denominator equal to 0. So g plus 4 equals 0. And then what is the one value of g that makes that equal 0? And the answer would be -4. So then we would say that g can be anything except it can't be -4 because that makes it not a real number. Same thing here. What would x have to be in order for this to equal 0? And there's a couple different ways to think about it. We can factor out an x and make it x minus 15 equals 0, so then it's a little bit easier to see. So 0 again would be one of our answers because anything times 0 is going to be 0, and we can't have that. And also 15 is going to be an answer because 15 minus 15 gives us 0. So 0 and 15 are two answers that it cannot be. If we have something like this that has a expression down at the bottom that can be factored out, you just need to factor it out. So we have y squared plus 5y plus 4. So I know when I factor, I'm going to have a y plus 4 in one set of parentheses, and then a y plus 1 in my other set of parentheses. And then which would make these two 0. So remember, we're going to set both of these equal to 0. So it's going to end up being -4 and -1, because -4 plus 4 is 0. So then 0 times whatever this is, it doesn't matter, is going to be 0. And then -1 plus 1 is 0. So then again, whatever this is, it doesn't matter, because it times 0 is going to give us 0. So we're finding which answers cannot make the denominators 0. Okay, the other part is going to be simplifying. So we need to look at what we have on the numerator and the denominator that can be simplified, and we're just going to simplify it. And the key part here is we can only simplify if it is being multiplied together, not added or subtracted. So if we're looking at something like this, 4 times a really, so let's write that out. So 4a over 8a. So we have some things that could be simplified here. We have a's here that can be crossed out. And then even this 4 and this 8 can be simplified. So 4 could be cut in half. So 4 goes into 4 one time, and 4 goes into 8 two times. So then my final answer would just be 1a over 2. Something over here, we're going to pull out a 3n out of our numerator, because 3 and 6 is the greatest common factor, or 3 is the greatest common factor of 3 and 6, and I could pull out an n, and then I would have a 2n plus 1 left in the parentheses, and then in my denominator I have a 2n plus 1. And we see that we have something that's exactly the same, so we can cross it out. So the top has a 2n plus 1, the bottom has a 2n plus 1, so we're going to simplify those, and we're really just left with 3n. It's a lot easier if n was, 3, well, now I know the answer is 9 to this problem, as opposed to plugging in 3 for all these n's up here, and really just simplifying it, and still getting 9 as the answer. So it might be a better idea to simplify before we start solving. This one's going to kind of be the same thing. So if I factor out that numerator, I end up with n and minus 2 and n plus 2 on top. And then if I factor out that denominator, I end up with n plus 2 and n plus 2. And we see that we have some things that can be crossed off here and simplified. I have 2n plus 2's. So really my answer here is n minus 2 divided by n plus 2. There's my little divided by sign. One thing to be cautious with is these negative ones. So if I'm going to factor out 5y minus 50, well, the greatest common factor of 5 and 50 is 5. I can't pull out a y since the 50 doesn't have a y. So I'm going to put y minus 10 in my parentheses. So 5 times y, 5y. 5 times 10 is negative 50. So we're just simplifying that numerator. And then if I simplify the denominator, it gets a little tricky here because it's a negative y squared. Okay, so I'm going to multiply this by negative 1 so that this really becomes then positive. Whoops, I don't want that. I want a positive y squared plus or minus 100 now. So if I multiply that whole thing by negative 1, I'm really just switching out all my signs. So it should look like this. Okay, so I multiply by negative 1 so that those get switched out. And you'll see why we do that in a second. So now if I'm factoring out that, I end up with y plus 10 and y minus 10. And now you'll see that since I did that, we have a y minus 10 and a y minus 10 on the top and the bottom. So I can simplify that like that. And so my answer ends up being 5 over y plus 10. Okay, so it's all about making things easier when we are simplifying these complicated problems.